Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 6. It only took us 6 episodes, but today we will finally get our first citizens in the Republic. Of course, we will need to sort out quite a few things, mostly centered around the different goods and services that the people will need to have a comfortable life. This will involve importing a couple goods, that was to be expected this close to the start, but at least we will be able to take food off the list of imports today. And if all goes well, we will be able to do the same with clothes in the next episode. We also need to move the vehicle maintenance garage into the city. In order to take full advantage of it, it needs a constant 24/7 supply of workers. But the vast majority of our time will be centered around the final adjustments needed to make the city livable, and then start inviting people. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. First things first, we don't need 2 separate distribution offices to deliver components for the maintenance garage. I decided to use dedicated lines for the different deliveries we will implement today, but still, there is no need to have 2 offices for that job anymore. At this point in time, I was still preparing to use offices for distribution, so I did place them near the border, but the idea will be abandoned soon after. We can just use dedicated lines for almost everything we do today. In fact, the only thing that really needs a DO would be the chemical deliveries for the clothing industry, but that won't come online in this episode. Next, we will need to set up a line which will deliver workers from the city to the industrial zone. I didn't want to disrupt the buses importing foreign workers just yet, but I did want to have the line in place by the time we can start inviting people. Let's not forget to tell the service depot to use the local incinerator to get rid of the garbage. How about we take care of the meat deliveries next? Now the freezer building has parking spots too, which is a most welcome addition. Anyways, we just need to set up a dedicated delivery going from the border to the freezer. We will use the biggest possible trucks, so we can use it to extend the storage capacity of the building a tiny bit more. Of course, same as before, we will tell the truck to wait for a full unload at the destination, so it will only drive around if it can leave town with nothing, and return with a full load. Next, how about we deal with the grain deliveries next? And look, we have a neat new truck available. It can carry as much as the Skoda, but it's a lot faster. Pretty much a no-brainer. Unfortunately, the grain silo is not finished yet. We should unpause construction, and give it high priority. Also, we might as well set up directions on the factory connections. The goods will flow from silo to factory to warehouse. Simple enough. The clothing is not that easy, but still really simple. Goods start at the warehouse, which feeds into the central fabric factory, which in turn supplies the 2 neighboring clothing lines, which finally feeds back into the warehouse at the end, completing the double circle. For some reason, one of the connections didn't want to allow me to set the direction of flow. It seems it thought it was going to a junction or a crossing. We will reset it a bit later, which will fix the problem. While we wait for the silo to be finished, we can plop down a second road depot, and continue setting things up. Ideally, I would like to use 2 of the new trucks to deliver food, and another 2 for the clothes. But those industries are not done yet, so we will need to import them for the time being. But, we will need to fast forward sooner or later anyway, so how about we do a quick time lapse of the silo construction. And done. We can start delivering the grain. For now, I just set them to unload fully at the silo, but later on we will set them to fill up the clothing warehouse as well, and then just sell whatever is left at the border. Next, let's set up the clothing warehouse. We will overproduce fabrics a little bit, but I don't think I will bother selling the excess. We will only have crops, chemicals, and the finished clothes in the warehouse. Crops will need the most room, and chemicals the least, so we set the numbers accordingly. Next, we need the food factory to be online before we can invite people. We have more room in town than workplaces, so we need somewhere to unload all the extra workers. I was about to start a new time lapse, but how about we instead start importing the goods for now, and redirect the lines later? We need to have a ready supply of consumer goods anyway, so might as well get them ready, and switch over to the domestic supply when they become available. First, the food. For now, I only set up the shopping center, but don't worry, I will soon remember that we have a prison to deal with too. Next, the clothes. This one will remain an import line today, but I really hope we can convert it to a local delivery soon. And it seems the freezer is almost completely full already. But, we still need a steady supply of electronics. This needs a much lower volume line than the others, so I just used a single truck, instead of two. And with that, the local supermarket is fully stocked. Technically speaking, we are ready to invite people, but let's wait until we are 100% sure we can employ everyone. Which means we need to wait for the food factory to be finished. In the meantime, how about we reorganize the demolition offices a tiny bit? I wanted to have the garbage trucks in one office, and everything else in the other. The only problem with this setup is that the open hull truck cannot carry that big excavator, and I still have the option for machine deliveries enabled, so it's a bit inefficient. Finally, the warehouse for the food factory is done, with the factory itself not far behind. This will be storing fresh food exclusively. Sometimes I really wish we could deliver construction materials before a phase of construction starts. I see no reason why we couldn't store the steel and planks on site for the roof while the main structure is still under construction. Either way, the factory is completed. At this point, we can safely tell the food delivery line to use that as the source, instead of the border, taking the first entry off the list of imports. And at this point, we can safely tell that line to also start exporting the excess production. We tell the trucks to wait for a full load at the warehouse, deliver whatever it can to the town, and then sell the rest. Okay, this factory connection is starting to bother me more than it should. Let's just see if replacing it would fix the issue. And indeed it does. That's all I needed. Next, how about we start filling up the clothing warehouse with crops too? I see no reason to delay. We just need to tell the trucks not to wait for a full unload at the grain silo, and that's it. I suppose we could also start naming some of the lines. Not all of them, just the ones that are more or less done. We will change the clothing line for example, so I didn't bother naming that one yet. And good thing that naming these things reminded me, we need to bring up a returning name for the industrial area, which contains the clothing industry. Setsumagrad. Next, I really wanted to move the maintenance garage into the city for staffing purposes, and this little block looks like a perfect place for it. First, let's check where the road connection will go. Then, we can delete the footpath section on that side. We also need a warehouse for the small secondary components, and we have plenty of room for it in the back. We just need to know where the driveway for that will go. I suppose we can just use that half-finished street. While looking around town, double-checking the readiness of the place for habitation, I finally stumbled onto the prison. Such an easy place to overlook. We just need to redirect the food and clothing deliveries to include it in the list of stops. And of course, it needs a source of meat too. Thankfully, it has a double parking lot, so we can safely let a refrigerated truck sit in one of them 24/7, and still allow other deliveries to be made. And the prison is open for visitors. I'll just set the rehabilitation program to be 100% centered around loyalty, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Let's not forget to disallow non-workers to enter the different stations. We don't want those places to fill up with people looking for booze and religion. We want them to be used by workers exclusively. Next, how about we go ahead and buy the track layer which will build the railroad until the border is directly connected to the RCO. My first thought was to try and buy a used track layer and fix it up later. I knew that we needed it to be disassembled to be delivered by a truck, but I didn't know if we can take it apart once it was put together already. As it turns out, we cannot. Hey, at least we only wasted 8,000 rubles on this little test. We need to buy a brand new disassembled track layer and deliver it to the office that way. Nice. It seems the MVU can also be bought in this form, not just the AGMU. In the last series, we started with the AGMU, so how about we buy the MUV instead? Nice, the footpaths at the future maintenance garage are gone. We can place the new buildings. I would still like to make sure we leave enough space for the footpath going through the driveway, so we should place it a bit further in. We just build the driveway in 2 sections, dividing it right where we want the footpath to go, and that's all there is to it. Looking good. Everything fits more or less perfectly. In the meantime, the track layer have been delivered, so we can tell that truck to stop. I forgot that I took that truck out of the maintenance delivery office, so we will need to replace it later. Now, about the RCO. There is simply no way we can afford to supply it with goods right now. The steel alone is prohibitively expensive, so we will need to wait a little while before we can get started on that. It will likely only happen once the oil industry is up and running. This is where I decided that we might as well sell the excess grain production, at least for now. Once we switch over to trains, then we will stop it, but the trucks are going back to the border anyway, so might as well. We should also restart the farm at this point. Our maintenance infrastructure is doing well these days, so we should be able to maintain the farming equipment. Well, I think it's time. Time to invite the first test subjects. I mean, citizens. Not too many for now, just a couple dozen per building, so we can see if they complain about anything important. We will check on them periodically, and if the only problems we see are booze and religion, then we will know that the place is ready for proper habitation. While I do not recommend anyone doing it, I found that using the slower time compression is still relatively safe with people living in the Republic. Emphasis on the word, relatively. I still notice that trucks sometimes unload very slowly with that thing active, so there are still simulation errors, so I will try to limit the usage of it as much as I can. But the faster version is absolutely off the table from now on. It seems garbage coverage isn't perfect, there are still buildings that are not connected to a collection point. For bigger facilities, it's not really an issue, but for smaller ones, it can be a problem later. Every house is only complaining about alcohol and religion, so we are in a pretty good place. There's one that has no school access, but we will deal with that a bit later on. Anyways, I still didn't feel like we were ready for a full town yet, so I decided to invite a couple intellectuals, so we can staff our education and administrative services better. To be able to better deal with the lack of pubs and churches, we should set up a quick little amusement park, so people have a less destructive outlet for their frustrations. They will forget about their other problems over time. I really wanted these to be on the shore of the river. Once we have a beach nearby, it will be a proper leisure district for people to relax. I even tried to see if maybe we can extend the terrain a little more, creating a small land pier for the park, but it took too long to bring up the riverbed, so I abandoned the idea. Obviously, we need a Ferris wheel, that's always the centerpiece of every theme park. As for the rest, we will just place the bumper cars, and one of the carousels. Ah, there's the source of the schooling issues. They can't reach the building. Nothing a couple extra footpaths cannot handle. That's better. The school building is in range now. At this point, I am confident that we can deal with the needs of the citizens, so it's time to fill the buildings up completely. And we're out of money. No surprises there, we've been relying on foreign workers for so long, it really took a bite out of our finances. And that's it. We will try to rely on homegrown citizens from now on. Once everything we have planned is completely finished, we will have an economy that can make a tiny amount of profit, so we are technically sustainable. At least for now. As the price of electronics go up, we will need to adjust, but at this very moment, we will be okay. But we are nowhere near the point where we can afford to finance the railroad constructions, so we definitely need to invest in the oil industry before we can get to it. Maybe we should disallow people from entering the rail station completely. There are no services there, so workers should congregate at the bus station instead. Well, the old bus line delivering workers to the industrial zone is no longer needed, so we can reassign all those buses to the line that uses the town instead. Oh, right. The rubbish. We are burning it all right now, but we make a lot of ash as a result. We could set up a bunch of small dumping grounds, and use a distribution office to spread the ash between them, so it would decay faster, but let's be honest, it's a hassle. We can just export it, pay less than 50 rubles, and it's all sorted. There. Almost a full load of ash, and they will take it off our hands for 22 rubles. That's a bargain if I ever saw one. I was really tempted to start researching right now, but maybe we should give it a tiny bit more time, so we can get a couple more college graduates to fill up all the administrative positions around town. And my alarm clock went off right at this point, but decided to wait a little bit more, just so we can supervise the construction of the maintenance garage. I mainly wanted to control the worker flowing in from the local residences. Wait for the materials to be delivered, then we can let people in. And that's it. Once the warehouse next door is also finished, we can move the whole operation into this new building. We just make one last check if the citizens are doing okay, and we can close off this episode. Now, about the next one. I would like to start researching as soon as possible, but for that, we need a couple more highly educated workers. I will likely get a geology tech going with a low number of researchers, and keep focusing on education primarily. With the oil industry looming on the horizon, we can safely afford taking out another million rubles worth of a loan if necessary. And given how much infrastructure we need just to extract the oil, I suspect that we will need it. I would also like to get some party HQ research going, mostly for loyalty and the distribution offices. So many neat features that we need to unlock. I know not everyone likes the restrictions that come with the tech tree, but I love it. Normally, I would have started using high-density panel apartments right away, but now, I had an excuse to use those low-rise buildings, which are a bit more cozy for a small town like this. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.